Well, why don't we get started now? Paula, if you want to mute everybody, then we
I
can.
just did them individually. Well, everybody except Emily. So Emily, I'm meeting you too.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, welcome everybody to the last German GRIVA SIG for the 23-24 calendar year. We're going to take a break after this and be back in September. Tonight, our presentation is all about your turn. So whoever submitted documents for me to take a look at, I will be sharing those with everybody tonight. But before we get to that, just a few housekeeping slides, as I always do. All of these programs are available free to members and non-members, but we do urge you to consider becoming a member. Our annual membership year runs from July 1st to June 30th, and an individual membership costs $20. There are membership benefits such as our quarterly newsletter and reduced rates for special events. And I'll be talking about some of those coming up, as a matter of fact. So if you want to have more information about that, please go to griva.org and take a look at the membership benefits and the various levels of membership that are available. One of the member benefits is the Gilmer maps. These are very high quality maps that were created around the time of the Civil War. And we have an inventory of maps for most counties of Virginia, and I think we still have a few counties in North Carolina as well. If you're a member of GRIVA, your price to purchase one of these maps is a little bit less than for non-members. And again, you can get more information about the Gilmer maps at griva.org. There is a tab specifically for the Gilmer maps. And also we have a recording of the program that was presented by Cassandra Farrell from the Library of Virginia on our YouTube channel if you want to get even more information about the Gilmer maps. Upcoming GRIVA events. Next Tuesday, Paula Williams will be doing her DNA SIG. You can sign up for that. Our upcoming program meetings at the end of May on the 28th, there will be a program by Brendan Burns on Revolutionary War records in Virginia and lineage societies. And then on June 17th, we have our semi-annual luncheon. This is our summer lunch, and you can sign up at the URL that's listed here on the screen. Then another series of upcoming events. These are special events that I talked about. If you're a member, you will get a reduced rate for attending these events. On Saturday, June 29th, we are having a program on interpreting colonial handwriting with Dr. Ray Thompson. On July 27th, we have researching county court records with Barbara Vines Little. And then on Saturday, the 24th of August, we have another presentation by Brendan Burns on researching your Rev War ancestors. There is information coming up, and if you go to the griva.org website and click on the upcoming events tab, all of these programs are listed there, and you should be able to get sign up information shortly. It's not there yet, but it will be there shortly. Upcoming non-GRIVA events. There is a Facebook event, which is virtual, coming up on May 10th, which is looking for sacred records, finding your German church records. And this is by Andrea Benschneider. She is a German woman who's working out of Hamburg, I believe, and she's a very good presenter. So I recommend that highly. On May 13th, the Michigan German Genealogy Society is having a virtual presentation on Finding Prussian Ancestors in Online Archives by Nancy Lowe. She does this presentation a lot, and I know that I've highlighted it in previous sessions. So if you didn't get to see it a different time, try to check it out this time. And then on the 21st of May, the Ohio Genealogy Society is having a presentation called Jumping into German and Austro-Hungarian Family Research by Stephen Wendt. So that should be interesting as well. Upcoming German SIGs. There are none. Have a nice summer. We'll be starting again in September. I don't have, since we finished going through all of the German states now, I don't have a set of programs to put in this slot just yet. So if you have suggestions for topics, just drop me a line at mail@griva.org and give me your suggestions, and I'll see what I can put together for the upcoming year of presentations. I'm thinking about starting out with handwriting. We've talked about this a lot as we go through various record examples, but it might be a good time to just review handwriting and go back to basics. So again, if you have other suggestions, drop me a line at mail@griva.org. So tonight's presentation is all about your turn, examples of documents that have been submitted. And the first three examples are all from colonial America, and they provide some insight into life at that time, but they also represent possibilities that exist for research here in this country, rather than the usual birth, marriage, and death records that we try to look for in Germany or wherever they are in Europe. Then, as a nice juxtaposition to this, there are a couple of letters that were written from Germany post-World War II to relatives in America. And we'll take a look at those and see what they reveal. Then we have some birth and death records trying to clear up who is represented in those records and what kind of information we can get there. And then we have a brick wall that has taken 20 years to solve. This is my own particular case, so I'll say more about that later. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some land measurement terminology, and I hope that all of that will be helpful to you as you go forward with your own research. So the first document that we have is a snippet of a Baltimore will from 1763. This was submitted by Linda Stuffelbein. Linda, if you're on the call and you want to mention something about this, you can unmute yourself and say so now.
I don't really have very much to add. I'm still stumped by that one name.
You and me both. So this snippet view, as I said, is all that was provided. And the challenge here is trying to figure out what this name right here is. The rest of the document that we can see here says, we, the creditors, the greatest creditors, approve of this inventory. And there are a couple of names. And then it says, in English, these are the names. I'm not quite sure how this translates into Casper Star, but okay, they think so. And then it says, we as the two nearest of kin approve of this appraisement. And one of the people here, the second person, is the daughter of the man who died. And the mystery is this person here. So if we zoom in on it a little bit, can we make any sense of that handwriting? Going back here for a second, that handwriting is the only one that's different. The rest has all been written by the same person. You can see that the handwriting doesn't change at all. But you get to this signature, and it's clear that somebody else wrote that. So what is that name? Linda has tried various ways to figure out who this person is. She had a Facebook group that looked at it. Somebody suggested that the first name could be Enid. I don't believe that it would be Enid because Enid is not a German name, number one. And I just don't believe that that's the case. But looking at it letter by letter, it's the first letter is maybe a J, but it doesn't look like a German J. Then maybe an N, or could be a M if this is a ink thing that didn't quite go together. Then D. This letter is a mystery. It could be a K, it could be a R. Since there's no other handwriting like this on the rest of the snippet view to compare it to, and apparently this person only signed their name, so they weren't the ones to write the document anyway, there's nothing to compare it to. The next letter here is an I. Then this is probably an N. And in German, when they have that straight line over an N or an M, that means the letter is doubled. So I-N-N. And then is this an E or is this maybe I-M? Just like we don't know if that's an M or that could be an M. So K-I-N-N or M-M. Then this is probably a G. Is this a T-Z-L? I don't know. Is T-H-L? Maybe this is S-C-H-L. It's a mystery. The one thing that gives us a possible way to find out is the fact that it says these are the two nearest of kin. So the only thing that I can suggest to Linda, because this is just really, really difficult to decipher, is to do a little bit more research about the deceased, this Martin Freisch, and look at things like tax records, church records, land records, court records, even newspapers to the extent that they existed back then. This is in Baltimore, and there was a church in Baltimore that is one of the oldest German churches in the country. And so possibly they attended that church, and there might be a listing of this person there. It just would require more research to figure out what the relationship is. Based on that first name, we can't even determine if it's a male or a female. So it could be a cousin, it could be a sister-in-law, it could be a mother-in-law or brother-in-law or stepmother or stepfather. We just don't know, and it's just going to require more research into the records. So Linda, I'm sorry, but that's the best I can do on this one. There's always a stumper.
Thank you for trying. I appreciate it.
Okay. Our next example is really fascinating. This is a document from the Moravian Archives in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And it's a document written by a guy named George Ernst Schlosser. And this is a 7-page document that I'm showing right here that is basically his part biography and part kind of faith journey is what I'd call it. And then also partly travelogue as to how he came to the US. So in this document, it lists where he was born, when he was born, who his parents were. It says his father was a minister, and it gives various places where his father served as a minister. Apparently, he didn't stay in any one place very long, so they moved around quite a bit. It talks about his education as a child, and then he he was educated to be a merchant, and his experiences as a journeyman. So he wandered around Germany and Austria, learning how to be a better merchant, apparently. And it's very interesting in one of these descriptions about his travels. He says, well, he ended up with a master in Austria who, and his father was very concerned about this because the master that he was going to be serving under was Catholic. And so his father came and checked him out and made sure that the guy wasn't going to try to convert him. And so gave his approval for him to train under this guy. And no sooner had daddy left than the guy started trying to convert him to Catholicism. So he left and went back home. So interesting details and tidbits like that. Then it talks about his marriage, which was arranged, and how he set up housekeeping in a city called Pforzheim, which is a city even to this day, which is famous for its gold and silversmiths. But he was not a gold or silversmith. He was a merchant in the city. His marriage was extremely turbulent, and eventually they were divorced. And part of the reason that he divorced his wife was because he became interested in and involved in the Moravian faith, and his wife just couldn't tolerate that, and in fact, didn't want to have much to do with religion at all. So there's a whole lot of information there about back and forth with his wife and their disagreements about this whole thing. And she didn't want to let the children go and be exposed to this Moravian sect. And then finally, after the divorce, and as he became more involved with the Moravians, he came to the decision that it was time to emigrate to the US. And so, very fascinating description of how he came to the US and specifically the route that he took. First, he went here and then he went there. And all of this was arranged with the higher ups, the hierarchy in the Moravian faith there, the people that were running it in Germany, and then coordinating with the people who had already come to the US. And so he goes up the Rhine into Belgium, into Netherlands, and then eventually gets on a ship to come to the US. So it's a fascinating, fascinating document. And just lots and lots of details. And it's wonderful to have this kind of detail so that you can see what his life in particular, but life in general was like, and also the process of coming to the US. It gives some insight into the route that was taken and how that all occurred. So there's a second letter from George. Once he has been established in the US, he settled in Philadelphia, and most of the Moravians were actually around Bethlehem, PA, which is a little bit about an hour or so north of Philadelphia. An hour, I say an hour, that's by car. I don't know how long it took back in his day. But at any rate, so he writes to the people who were leading the Moravians up in Bethlehem, and he says, I really want to move to Bethlehem because my children are particularly uneducated and influenced by the general corruption of the youth, especially here. I thought that was really amusing because there isn't an immigrant anywhere that hasn't said, my children are being corrupted by the influence of the other people around them. Years ago, about 10 or more years ago, I translated a very similar letter from a guy by the name of William Carpenter, who had come from Germany and was living in Virginia and eventually settled in Kentucky. And he said exactly the same thing. These children just have no manners and they don't want to speak German anymore, and they're just being totally corrupted. So I included that as well, just to give you an idea of how people resist settling in with the people around them. They want to stay with people who are similar to them. This next document is from the Revolutionary War, and this was submitted by Kent Robinson on behalf of Kay Maria. And I think I saw Kay on the call here. Kay, do you want to talk about this for a minute? You can unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Okay. So in December of 1776, 10 to 12 men, including two of my ancestors, were arrested, charged with treason. And this was the letter they had written, or not a letter, a document they had written a week or two beforehand to explain their position of what they were trying to do. But by the way, they were all found guilty, but they were fined and all promised to act better in the future, just to give that little piece.
So is this treason against the crown, or?
No, but by that point, there was a committee of safety that was the government in Pennsylvania. So
Okay.
it was against the colonial effort.
Okay. All right. So what this document says is, hang on, I've got my translation right in front of me. So this says, the very first line says, this is a true copy of a Tory alliance. This is why I was confused about Tory versus Patriot. So it says, proclaimed and to know for all those who have a need to know that we residents of Lynn Township in Northampton County and the province of Pennsylvania with Penn Township have united together because of the great unrests, because we are not willing to fight in such a way. So therefore, we are now in great danger with our goods and chattel and are unsure whether and there's a word here that I can't read, but it's the something party, like a political party or maybe I'm not sure what, but the party will come and capture us or our goods by force. Therefore, we have decided to defend ourselves as we have been attacked, but with the condition that if we are left in peace, we will stay calm and true. Therefore, we are uniting together in the sum of 50 pounds Pennsylvanian lawful money. So if one or several break the reported article, this agreement here that they're talking about, then the criminal or criminals must pay the above recorded sum of 50 pounds without delay or procrastination. If any company or person should be attacked, then every person must give assistance. And all this we affirm to uphold firmly and steadfastly, and sign it with our own hand on the 16th day of December, 1776. This is a marvelous colonial document. And here you see all of the signatures of all the people in both these townships that signed and agreed to pay this 50 pounds Pennsylvania lawful money. What's interesting about these signatures is many of the surnames are repeated. So there's many family members or relations among them. and as Kay said, two of these people are relatives, ancestors of hers who participated in this. So this is a map of that area from the David Rumsey map collection. And you can see this is Lynn Township that they were talking about. And this is Penn Township that they were talking about. And just for reference, right over here is Bethlehem, where all those Moravians were located as well. So it's all in that same area. So there's a few significant things about the document itself other than the content. A lot of the words use old spelling, and I want to say I'm not sure actually if it's old as opposed to maybe Americanized spelling, because they use Einunta instead of Einunda, and hunt versus hunt, wir versus wir, beting versus beding, and jete versus jede. So in each case here, it's a T instead of a D. Now, this is a natural substitution that takes place between German and English, but it's unusual to see it like this. I've never seen it consistently like that in German documents in Germany. So that's why I think it might be an Americanization rather than necessarily old spelling. But anyway, so there's old spellings like that that are throughout the document. And one of the other things that is consistent both with this and with the Moravian documents that I translated, these people hated to use punctuation. They don't use commas, they don't use periods. So often part of the challenge is not just reading the handwriting, but trying to figure out where the end of a sentence is and which modifier goes where, because the punctuation just isn't there, or they use commas instead of periods. So it's like the whole page is a giant run-on sentence. I don't know, but we do the best we can at any rate. So as I mentioned, there's a list of over 60 residents, or at least in the snippet that I was given, and many of the surnames are repeated. So it would appear that families or relatives were among the signers of these. So that gives you, again, an idea of the community of people that we're talking about. And Kay had also mentioned that a lot of German Pennsylvanians or Pennsylvania Germans very early on in the war joined a troop of German soldiers that fought for Washington. So that's of interest as well. And again, as I mentioned, I'm not sure what this party is that's behind the danger to the residents of these two townships, but it's some sort of opposition party, and it's some little squiggle of a word or phrase, that syllable that I just could not decipher. But at any rate, so that's the Rev War document. Thank you, Kay.
So Shirley, I was just going to say they were correct. They were in danger because they got arrested. So
Yeah.
they kind of knew that was a problem. So
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yep. So these three documents, as I said initially, they show an interesting perspective on life in colonial America and give us examples, I would say non-traditional examples of potential research into our ancestors beyond just the usual birth, marriage, and death records. So the next couple of documents that we have are post-World War II letters that were written from Germany to relatives in the United States. And these were submitted by Nikki Lagodakis. Nikki, are you on the call tonight? Do you want to talk about this for a sec?
Yes, these were letters written by relatives to my aunt and my grandmother. And I just found them recently. I had them stuffed away in one of my genealogy notebooks and happened to go through and find them. And there were a couple of ones that were earlier, right after the war, where apparently they learned that my father had been stationed nearby and they were upset that he hadn't come to visit them during the war, which I found interesting.
Sure, he has time to take time out of battle and go see his relatives, right?
Yeah, right. Well, his in-laws, relatives by in-law. But my cousin later went to visit descendants of this family and actually went to visit the original house that was still in the family from early on to into the 1990s.
That's great. Okay, so the first letter is just very short, and it is from this family in Germany to the relatives in, where were they in the US?
St. Louis.
Oh, okay. So they're writing to the sister-in-law Augusta and Mimi, and then the family of Wilhelm Kuhhilte and the family Beatty. So obviously it's somebody who's non-German, has married into this German family. And it's basically just reestablishing contact with the people in America after the war, and gives a very brief summary of what's happened to them in the time that maybe they weren't able to have any contact. So they mention that their daughter is, I guess it's a daughter, it sounded that way, Frida had died during the war. Their son-in-law and granddaughter are now living with the grandparents, the people who were writing this letter. And this is a joint letter to several families in America, including the sister-in-law. So they're saving postage. Things are really tight. And this would be like almost like a round robin type of letter. You know, I'm sending it to you, but you can share it with all these other people who I've included in the salutation. And in this map here on the corner, you can see where the people were living who wrote this letter. Then the next letter, you can see, yay, I didn't have to decipher handwriting, but it's a 2-page typed letter, which gives us much more detail about the conditions on the ground in after World War II. This was again 1947. So just to give you an idea, it doesn't take real long to read, so I'll just read the entire translation, and you can experience what the conditions were. Our dear relatives, dear Mimi, we received your dear letter of 20th July on 20 August. So it took almost a month to get from the US to Germany. I thank you very much for it, and I'm glad that the relationship between us has been reestablished. As I read, you are all doing well, and I can report the same for us health-wise. The weather here is cool and wet since yesterday. Since June, we have not had any rain, rather a great heat and every day and drought. Everything here is dried up. No vegetables grew, and the potatoes are very small. We have a bad winter before us. Many people will die from hunger and the cold if no help arrives from abroad. There is also nothing here to heat with. For old people, it is particularly bad because everything is so expensive on the black market, and no one can live on what you get from ration cards. On the black market, bread costs 60 Reichsmark, and a worker earns about 40 Reichsmark per week. Think about that. You can't even buy a loaf of bread for what you've earned in a week. We're very fortunate to live sort of in the country. We still have something to eat. With clothing, it's equally very bad here. For 2.5 years now, we cannot buy a piece of clothing. The children hardly have anything decent to wear. The girls like to make themselves fine. Anneliese is already such a young lady. She is 15 years old, but one can buy nothing for money. People only want to trade for things. If only I could send you money for a dress, but of course our money is worth nothing to you. Dear Mimi, will you and Billy still have your inheritance from grandmother at the bank here? Don't you want to come to Germany in order to use it up? Mother has often said that she would like to see you again sometime. Antoniette's husband has always been in our area when he came from Bielefeld. That's 20 kilometers from here, hardly half an hour to drive by car. My in-laws live there. The Ami, that's what we call the Americans, were great favorites of the children because they often gave them something. As you wrote, Billy is still in the Air Force. Hopefully there will be no war again. It was awful for women and children. Dear Mimi, you probably do not feel that way there. The bombing was the most dreadful thing. Here in our city, many houses were destroyed. Even our house was damaged. But that is over with again. Apartments are very scarce. Often 5 or 6 people live in one room. The many people who come from the Russian zone find no place to live. Here it is a true misery for housing. You probably can't even imagine such a thing. So I will close my letter now. And then the rest is just greetings to all the various family members in back in the US. So it's a very poignant letter that again describes the conditions that they're suffering through after the war. And it took quite a while for things to normalize. And depending on which zone you were in, whether it was the American zone or the Russian zone, things were less worse, let's say, as opposed to just rather than better. But these people luckily were not in the Russian zone, and so they didn't suffer quite the same degree of hardship. As they mentioned, the people that were coming from the Russian zone were having great trouble getting housing and so forth. So very interesting perspective of what it was like in that post-war period. Thank you, Nikki, for submitting that. Our next example is some birth and death records. These were submitted by Dorothy Preter. Dorothy, you want to comment on these records?
Well, had great difficulty trying to read them and trying to determine that one child's name, because I thought I had two baptismal records and one death record. And so why was the name reused? That was my big thing, was did I read the names correctly? So forth. And then later on, may I post our meeting for our group?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the first birth record is for a child by the name of Matthias, who was born on the 8th of February and baptized on the 9th of February in 1839. And he is the son of Martin Kidrowski and Victoria Maschke. And the godparents were, hard to read that name in the corner because it kind of goes off the edge of the page, but maybe Koch Maschke and Marianne Kalsch. So Dorothy had a challenge reading this child's name, and I'm reading that as Matthias. So then there's a second birth record in 1841, which is on the 14th of February, so 2 years later, and the pastor baptized a child again by the name of Matthias, and it has the same parents, and this time it gives us a little bit more information. So it calls Martin, you can see here, a Halbbauer, which is a half farmer, and Victoria, his wife, and then it has a different set of godparents for this particular child. So the question is then, here is a death record in 1841, and the death record is for a child named Matthias. So is this the same child? Is it a different child? Based on the death date and the information in the record, this is the child that was born a month earlier in 1841. So what I found very interesting about this particular record is it says, it repeats that his father was a Halbbauer, but it says that the child died from a cough. He was 2 weeks old, and he was buried on the 7th of March. And then it says the heirs are his parents, as if a 2-week-old child could have heirs. I found that very, very peculiar, and I've not seen that before. But apparently in this particular parish, they listed heirs no matter how old you were. So one of the other things here that I wanted to point out, this first birth record, it says that the child was born in a place called Konitop. And then the second record says it's Tuschkau. And the third record also says Tuschkau. So using Meyer's Gazetteer, I looked up both these places. And here you can see Tuschkau right in the middle of the map. And then this second one, this big circle, is actually the area called Konitop. And down here in the corner, you can see Tuschkau appears. So I gather that this Konitop area would be like saying the Delaware Valley or something, which incorporates many, many different towns. So Konitop is a wider geographic area, but it still includes the town where the child was born and died. Then we have the death record for the father. Martin Kidrowski died on May 3rd. I'm sorry, was buried on May 3rd, died on April 30th, and he was 65 years old in 1857. This is one of these records that goes across 2 pages. So this is the left-hand side of the page. And then on the right-hand side of the page, it lists the type of death or illness, and he died of consumption. And then it lists the heirs of the deceased as far as the pastor knows of them. And here it says the wife Victoria Ni Mashke and 5 children, of which 2 are still minors. So Dorothy had the question. She thought that at this point, most of the children were grown up, but the question is, what is the age of majority? And that is one of these things that it depends. It depends on what the laws were in that particular area, in that particular time frame. And we don't, we would need to do more research to find out what that is. So even if a child was, for example, 21 at this point in time, maybe the laws were such that you had to be 25 in order to be considered no longer a minor child. So something to look into, and that hopefully helps Dorothy with this particular family.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for confirming those last words after the 5 children, because I couldn't read them.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that for the birth and death records. Next, we get to an example that is kind of near and dear to my heart. This is a brick wall that I have had for 20 years. Normally, when somebody gets married for the first time, it will say, so and so, son of thus and thus. And in this particular case, this is probably my 4th or 5th great grandfather, who was married on the 28th of January, 1800. And it just says, this is Franz Floral from Nemukau. And it doesn't say who his parents are. And it says who the wife's parents are, but it doesn't say who his parents are. So then we go on. This is, I wanted to throw this in on the marriage record. This column here tells us the house number for the person that's getting married. So this is a cadastral map for the town of Nemukau. This is in Bohemia. And right here, where this red arrow is pointing, this is house number 17. So I know exactly where he was living. What's interesting about house number 17 is that actually it belonged to his father-in-law, and within a year of his marriage, he bought it from his father-in-law. So he had some children with his first wife, and his first wife died. So he married a second time. And usually when somebody marries for the second time, they're identified as a widow or a widower. And here we have this record for Franz Floral, who got married on the 11th of August. And again, it identifies him as house number 17 in Nemukau, but it doesn't say he's a widower. Actually, maybe this column indicates that he's a widower. But it doesn't give me his parents' names. This makes me crazy. And because I didn't have his parents' names, I looked through every single record in Nemukau. There was not a single other Floral anywhere in this town. So basically, that was my brick wall. I didn't know where to go from there. I couldn't do collateral research with siblings. I didn't know what to do. I looked. So the wife that he married, the second wife that he married is from a town called Moravis, which is here. And he was in house number 32, which you can see by the red arrow. So he now owns 2 pieces of property, one in a town called Moravis, which is a little bit southwest of the first one in Nemukau. And he has 2 sets of children. So this map shows you where these various places are. The Havran in the middle there is where his second wife was working as a servant before she got married. So you can see roughly the geographic separation there. So Franz died on the 22nd of March, 1826. So this is another example where we need to expand our research, cast our net further than just the birth, marriage, and death records. I know that it's very easy and lovely because they're more or less formulaic, and especially when they're in table format, there's not much to read. But when we get to documents like this, which is actually his will and inventory of his estate, this is where we get to the good stuff. And in fact, this particular document was not in a book with wills or probate information. It was actually in the deed book. So remember I said that he owned two properties, one in Nemukau and one in Moravis. He's got two sets of children, by one by each of his wives. And so his will says, how are we going to divide the property? And in this particular on this particular page, it lists this property, that property, and then a very little bit of his personal items. And the properties are valued in, you can see on the side here, like right down here, it says CM, and that stands for Konventionsmünze, which is a conventional coin that was established, the value of which was established in 17, I want to say 53 or 57, something like that. So they actually had a general agreement among countries in Europe that each coin would have a certain value based on a certain weight of silver or gold. So that's why it's called a Konventionsmünze. And it's actually a Gulden, which is Austrian, an Austrian coin. And for whatever reason, the abbreviation for Gulden is FL, which actually stands for florin, which is maybe an older type of coin. So a Gulden is worth 60 Kreuzer, and a Kreuzer is worth 240 pfennigs. So now you know all you need to know about Austrian currency in 1826. At any rate, on that first page that I showed, that shows the assets. The second page shows the liabilities, the Passivstand. And among the liabilities are the burial costs. And then, oh my goodness gracious, it says Brother Anton Floral, and it gives a town from Satschitz, is a creditor of his brother Franz. And then Anton is also mentioned later on as the brother-in-law of Elizabeth Floral, the second wife, and it names him as the guardian of her minor children. Wow. So all of a sudden, I have this another person to do research on. So I go to Satschitz and try to look him up, and looked at surrounding towns and came up with the marriage record for Anton Floral. And look, lo and behold, Franz Floral from Nemukau, number 17, is listed as one of the witnesses to this marriage. So I have confirmed the relationship, that this is indeed the right person. But son of a gun, it still doesn't say who Anton's parents are. So I have to do a little bit more digging. This marriage took place in a little town called Palet, which does not exist anymore. So it's wonderful that I was able to find this. And then in Palet, I was able to find the birth records for both Franz and Anton, and I now have the name of his parents. Yay. And based on that, I was able to track this family all the way back to 1664. And most of the people after this little town called Palet came from a town called Klein Priesen, which is right here next to the places where Franz Floral was to begin with. So this is something that, as I said, took me 20 years to finally get to. And part of the reason that I was able to do it was just randomly one day I went and looked to see what other records were available. And suddenly land records were available, where when I was doing the research originally, there were no land records to look at. So always go back and see what's been added, whether it's to Family Search or Ancestry or MyHeritage or whatever archive you're using. Stuff gets added all the time, and you never know where you're going to find that little nugget, that golden clue that will break through your brick wall. So that's my story. And then to wrap it up tonight, Wilson Royer had requested that we take a look at land measurement terminology. And so I wanted to include also not just a little bit about that, but about farmer terminology, because it kind of relates. So this is a serfs list for the town of Voderad, which again is in that same area of Bohemia that I just showed in the previous example. And the people in every year they did this list. They're available on Family Search, and they go back from about in the 1720s all the way into the 1760s or 70s. It varies by town, but there's a whole series of them. And every year they did a list like this. And in each town, then they're broken out by Halbbauer and Viertler. And they also have categories for Baum, which is the full Bauer, Hausleute, who don't own any property, and then also a separate category for widows and orphans, Witwe and Waisen. So in Family Search, when you go to the Family Search wiki, if you type in German word list, you'll get to a word list. They used to have a printed copy of it, and in the word list they have things like numbers, ordinal numbers and cardinal numbers, and days of the week and names of the months and so forth. And one of the categories in that German word list is types of farmers. Can you believe that there's over 125 words that are used in the German language to describe farmers? And I was just on a webinar recently where a person commented on this and said she keeps finding new terms that aren't even on this list. So I urge you to take a look at that when you come across an occupation for somebody in your research where you think, well, that must mean farmer, but what kind of farmer is it? Because there are great variations in terms of what that means. Sometimes it's just farmer, but sometimes it also indicates the status within the town or the rights that they had for that level of farmer and so forth. So, for example, here we have an Achtelbauer. So it's somebody who has 1/8 of a farm. And I mentioned a Viertler, that's somebody who has 1/4 of a farm. Well, what constitutes a farm? That's the big question. So we have this particular book, which is available on the internet, and I forget which source it is, but I think it's one of the Bavarian websites that has digitized books. But at any rate, this is the complete handbook of money, measurements, and weights in all the countries on Earth, in case you had any question. This was published in Quedlinburg in 1830. And it's a wonderful, wonderfully detailed book. So I'm going to use this as the basis for looking at the various terms that you might come across when you're trying to figure out how big was that farm. So the first thing to know or to internalize is no matter what you're talking about, these land measurements vary by time and place. So even though it says it's this much, it might be this much here and that much there. So for example, we have the word acker, which the cognate in English is acre. It's not exactly the same thing. It can mean field or cultivated land. So it's not actually how big is an acre or whatever it is. But then we have words that derive from that, which are terms that are the equivalent of farmer. So you have Ackerer, Ackermann, Ackerbauer, Ackerwirt, Ackerleute, which is a couple who are a married couple who are farmers. And in this definition here for Acker, he says in Bamberg, an Acker is 150 square Ruten. But a Rute was defined differently depending on what type of field it was. So for meadows, it was defined as 361 Ruten. For fields of grain, it was 400, and for forests, it was 441. So you can see that even depending on the type of field that it defines, the measurement varies. And then in Erfurt, it has yet a different definition, and it might be 168 square Ruden, or it equals 1 1/300th Morgen, or 731 Klafter. So again, you have to know where the term was used and when in order to be able to figure out how big exactly was that farm. So another term that you might come across is an elle. And an elle is a unit of length that varies from 21.5 to 32.7 inches. Well, we can't get more precise than that, right? And here we have in this book of measurements, we have a definition for an elle, and there's different ways that it can be defined. And for each town in the world, it's listed alphabetically. So we have Hamburg, the free city, and we have Heidelberg in Baden and Heilbronn in Württemberg. So all these different places have their very own definition of how big an elle is. So this is in millimeters, and the Rhineland has a different definition, and so forth. So be sure to look down the page and find the place that you need in the table. Same thing for Fuß. Fuß translates to foot. The foot varies in length, and you can see in this table the extreme variation in the length of a foot. A hectare is 1,000 square meters. But again, you can see you don't even have to be able to read this. You can see the different numbers that are in the paragraph that I've excerpted. So hectare varies. A Hufe is a term that's used in northern Germany. Roughly the same Hube is used in southern Germany, and in Switzerland it might be referred to as a Hubel. It is a farm measurement size, and you can see that it's got various definitions and for different places. If you go back to that farmer list, you can find words that mean farmer where it says Hübner or Halbhübner, and that comes from this word Hube or Hufe. So again, the words interrelate for farm and farmer. So in practice for a Hufe, you can see on this chart that we have one Hufe, so this would be a farm, and then we have a Halbhufe, and twice as much and 4 times as much. You can see how that relates in terms of the size of the field. So this actually came from an article on Wikipedia, so that you can go look up Hufe. And I think the article is in German, but you can use Google Translate and get more information on Hufe or Hube. A yoch means yoke, and again, it's a measurement of acres. This particular term is used in Bohemia and Austria. Then we have klafter, which means fathom or cord, and it's a unit of length, which is 6 feet, or a unit of volume, which is 6 feet by 6 feet by 4 feet. And do I have to say it? It varies by place. So you may find that, I think, more in terms of a definition of yields rather than acreage, but again, it's there as a definition for you. Then we have a morgen. Morgen actually means morning, but in terms of farm terminology, it is a unit of land measure, which is the amount of land one man and one ox can plow in one morning. So very practically speaking, if you have dry, sandy land, you can plant a whole lot more in one morning than if it's rocky or swampy or hilly. So just by definition, that morgen is going to be various sizes. And again, you can see the table that shows the various sizes depending on what area you're talking about. A rute is a rod, and this is a land measure that varies by location. It's like when we talk in Virginia about rods and chains in terms of surveying a property here, that's the equivalent type of term would be rute. And there's another word, kette, which would be the equivalent of chain. But I have never come across kette in terms of land measurement in any German document that I've looked at. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just haven't seen it. And then a viertel means a quarter, and a viertler is a farmer with a quarter-sized farm. Again, varies by location in terms of what that means, but this particular book defines it in great detail. And that's that. I just wanted to go back real quick. Actually, I'm going to go back to the very first map. Sorry, don't mean to make you dizzy. There. You see this map here? This should give you an idea of this Bauer, Halbbauer, Viertelbauer. So the size of the field varies. So this might be a full farm. This might be a half farm. This might be a quarter farm. And you can see it very plainly on this cadastral map, how it's laid out. And these might actually be 1/8 of a farm, or a farmer might have a little bit of a field here and a little bit of a field here and a little bit of a field here because he purchased it or inherited it at various times. So it's not necessarily the case that each farmer's farmland will be contiguous. And this is a map that shows you can see how the village is in the center of the town and all the fields are in the outlying area. And it actually shows the name of the owner of those fields. So it's a great resource if you have relatives in Bohemia. And in fact, there will be an article in an upcoming GRIVA newsletter that describes how to access these types of maps. So that's it for me tonight. Questions, comments?
Actually, you did get a question about the source of the map. So I guess direct them to the upcoming newsletter or anything you wish to tease.
Well, okay, there is, this is not from there. Actually, the maps that I showed, oh shoot fire, let me
Let's just talk about the one you were just the cover.
Okay, hang on. This map is from a website called mapy.cz. And it has an interface in multiple languages, but you need to be in the Czech version in order to get this 19th century map that has the old German names of the towns on it. The other one that's on the title slide, and also this is from the same source. Hang on. I don't think I have the website written down off the top of my head. Shoot. I'm gonna stop sharing and go to the website actually. Okay, that particular map came from a website called AGS Alpha George Sally .c as in Charlie, U Z as in zebra, K .cz as in Czechoslovakia /ARCHIV/. I'll put that in the chat box.
Cool. I was just copying it down to do so myself. So if you're doing it, I will stop.
Okay. Yeah, I know that was a mouthful. And again, this will be in the article that's upcoming in a future GRIVA newsletter. Emily can speak to which edition that will be. But awesome site. They have cadastral maps from the 1800s, and the date may vary depending on which map you choose, but they also have topographical maps so you can see, oh, was this swampland? Was this reasonable land? Was it hilly? Was it whatever? And again, like I showed for these two towns, it shows where all the fields are laid out around the center of the town, and it shows the in fact, I'm gonna go ahead and share that screen again because I wanted to point out one more thing. There, okay. So on these maps, think of it as like a Sanborn map. If the house is pictured in pink, that means it's a brick house or stone house. And if it's in yellow, that means that it's a wooden house. So in other words, not as good. Dark green like this indicates that it's a garden. So it's like maybe it's a kitchen garden or something that you can grow a few veggies on, but it's not really arable, not the field where you're doing your whole crop. This kind of pinkish area or beigeish area is the actual fields, and the light green indicates meadows. And not shown on this map, but depending on how far you zoom out or where your particular town is located, sometimes there will be a gray area that has little trees in it, and that indicates that it's forest area. So the maps are really, really informative and just a wonderful extra piece to be able to document your people.
Excellent. You know how we genealogists are. We love our maps.
Exactly.
But that's got great information.
Yeah.
Okay.
So any other questions, suggestions for September?
Earlier you were asked, is the RevWar doc available with name translation?
I did not transcribe all the names. Oh, come on. Now it doesn't want to go there. There we go. Okay. So the names are Philip Moser, Jacob Wustmann, Daniel Oswald, Heinrich Faller, Christian Schumann, Johann Michael somebody, Philip Schuck, Daniel Schumann. There's one of those names repeated. Georg Adam Dörr, Christian Kirsch, Philip Gustman. It's the same as that second one on the list. Georg Schuck. Looks like Heinrich. Rotning. Again, a lot of them are repeated. Like you've got a Miller here, here's a Oswald, here's a Oswald, here's a Haller, here's a Haller, here's another Schumann, here's another Moser. So they're all over the place. Why does this person think they might have somebody on the list?
I'm not sure, which is if you want to turn your mic on and expand on your question.
I was just wondering whether or not they had, it was translated to see the list of names, because it looks like it's more names than it's on this particular document. And I was
Yeah,
looking for the name of Schmitz, SCHMITZ.
I didn't see a Schmitz on the document, but I mean, they would have had to be living in either Lynn or Penn Township at that particular point in time. It looks like the list goes on down at the bottom. I only got these two pages of it, but it looks like there's more names that just didn't make it across to me. So it's possible that somebody else is in there. But I didn't see a Schmitz.
Where is this located, this document?
I have no idea. Kay, do you want to talk about where it's located? Where you found it?
I think Kay may have left.
Okay. I don't know. It was just sent to me and I did not get any source for it.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Wilson asked, is there an original of the will?
For my family there? No, well, the will was incorporated as part of the land record because most of his assets were the two pieces of property in Moravis and Nemilkau. So there wasn't a separate will, but it's in the land records are available in the Leitmeritz archives in the Czech Republic.
No, I think it was the first document you worked on. Maybe it was
that one, the Baltimore will. This one.
Yeah.
Linda, do you know where that was located?
Because is it a will that's been copied, transcribed into a will book, and there's an original will somewhere.
Yeah, again, all I got was the snippet.
Oh.
I don't know where this came from or if there's an original will.
I did. This is Linda. There was an original will, but this paper is actually from the estate papers, not as part of the will itself. And I had never seen where the greatest creditors had to approve of an inventory, but the inventory was done of Martin Tresch's estate. And then Casper Starr, who apparently that first signature is his, was owed £7. And this second person, Wendell Bright, who I think was actually Wendell Bright, was owed maybe £2. And then the two nearest kin had to approve. So none of this was actually in the will itself. The will was translated from German. Martin actually wrote his own will, and it's one of the strangest wills I've ever seen. It's only about a paragraph. He didn't name his wife. He said, the woman will have the place to raise the children until they come of age. And then his second son, Martin, was only about 16 when his father died. He was offered the opportunity to buy the land for £60 at the rate of paying £6 a year or something for 10 years. I don't know where a 16-year-old was going to get that kind of money to pay for the land, but he didn't name any of his other children. And the only reason I know who they are is because the last page of the estate papers that were filed listed each of the children and put their age. And that was in 1764. And interestingly, Martin Jr. was not listed in those surviving children. So sometime between 1761 and 1764, he apparently died. But this is part of the estate papers and not in the will itself. So it's, even though the original will was translated, this was not. It's already in English. And unfortunately, this person with the mysterious name didn't know how to write cursive or spell very well, because nobody seems to be able to figure out. I tend to think the name might be Carnegie. Somebody suggested that instead of the Z-E at the end, that might be an H. And then the K-N-I-G-G-E might make a little bit more sense. And there was a Nicholas Carnegie that was in the Baltimore area at that time, but I still can't figure out what this first name is. That certainly doesn't say Nicholas. I don't know what it is. So that's all I know about this.
It's a mystery.
Definitely. And you notice below it says Elizabeth Thrush, the executrix. Well, their son Jacob ended up down in Georgia. He fought in the American Revolution, and his descendants all use the surname Thrash, Thrash. And she married, by 1764, she was married to a Philip Emmis, and that name was written by the English-speaking clerk. And for the life of me, I can't find another German name that looks anything like Emmice, which is how the English-speaking clerk wrote his surname. So I don't know. She married somebody named Philip with a name that sounded something like Emmis, but I don't know if it was E-H-M something or other, or if the C is supposed to have an S-H or a T-H at the end. I don't know. So these little clues are all I have. However, this Catherine Trush, I am sure that she ended up marrying Casper Starr because she's exactly the right age. His wife is named Catherine. I'd never seen the surname before, but my husband has 2 DNA matches to descendants of Jacob Thrash from the Revolution. So I think that's his wife, Casper Starr's wife. But I'd still love to know who this other person is who signed above her.
And
the only thing I was trying to get to was the authenticity of this copy here, because there's a seal, it says seal in the upper right corner. So it was, let's assume it was recorded, but this may not have been the actual, it may have been part of probate. So you're saying it's not the will, it's the will was proven or part of probate, but it was recorded. And is this the actual document, or these documents? My understanding, some of these documents were later copied, hand copied into books. So just as deeds were, because deeds were what, they were torn in half so that the copy that resided at the courthouse could be matched to the original deed. You had an irregular tear, but then they were also later transcribed and put in books. And
I don't
and
think
is this a transcription of the original document, or is it the original document? That was all.
I got this from the Maryland archives, and this would not be a copy because you can clearly see that there's different handwriting in this document. If it was the clerk that had copied it somewhere else, you wouldn't. The Vendel Bright, his signature is different than the clerk who wrote Casper Star, and both of those signatures are different than Casper's German signature. And
okay. Yeah.
So this was the original, and this was an agreement to the inventory, the appraisal of the estate. But it's a mystery.
I would look at court records or land records or something, because if this person lived in that same area, they have to appear in other places. So just like, I'm sure all of the Maryland papers have been abstracted and indexed and everything. Just start looking through court records and see if a name that starts with a K, K-I-N or K-I-M or something appears. Yeah,
I've tried. I've looked in court records. There are not many tax records from this era for Baltimore County. I've tried. The only thing that I've come up with that looks anything like this surname is Carnegie, that this Nicholas Carnegie was in the area at the time. But that first name is definitely not Nicholas. And the list of children I saw for him, there was nothing in there that could ever possibly look like this, whatever this JUID is or whatever that name is. I'm wondering if that's only a partial first name or something, but I don't know. Said I'm not very good at reading the old German writing, but I haven't found anybody that's been able to give me any kind of clue, even if that's a man or a woman.
I can't tell. I'm stumped.
What
Really?
I'm hoping is that this is a relative of his wife, whether a male or female, because nobody knows her maiden name. But I said I can't track her second husband, Philip Emmis. This is the only place I can find where he has anything. He doesn't appear in any land records up there.
Remind me, do you know where he's from in Germany?
No, not really. He's on the ship's passenger list that left from Rotterdam, and somebody claimed somewhere he was from, and I don't remember where it was. They said he was a Palatine, and my husband does have a lot of Palatine ancestors, but I couldn't find any corroboration. I looked in Family Search German records, not just searching for the person, but I looked in to see if there was a German record that confirmed the date for this supposed Martin, and I couldn't find anything. So that Family Search family tree, a lot of those dates in there are wishful thinking and family lore, or just plain stuff people make up. I couldn't find any corroboration. So
did
his
he come
home
in
is
Philadelphia?
Yes.
Okay. Have you looked in Strasburger and Hinckley?
No, I don't have any access to that. I'm in Tucson.
It's online.
Strasburger and Hinckley is online. It's a 3-volume set. The actual name of the volumes escapes me right now, but it's a 3-volume set of ships that came into Philadelphia. And when you came into the port of Philadelphia, the first thing they did is they marched all of the adult males from the port down to City Hall and made them sign this document. And so you'll find actual signatures for these guys in the, I think it's in the 3rd volume, but the first 2 volumes show the passenger lists and the names of the ships and the captains and when they came into Philadelphia.
Yes.
So
he came in, I found a print copy of that. He came in 1750 on the ship Brother. And there's somebody that looks like a Johann Jacob, different spelling of the last name. He's 3 or 4 names above Martin, but people assume that that's probably his brother, but it looks like that guy stayed in Pennsylvania. And I tried looking into his family too. I found nothing that looks like Carnegie or anything like it. And they don't know where the Johann Jacob guy is from either in Germany.
okay,
It just says the brother sailed for Rotterdam, and that particular passenger list says nothing about those people being Palatines.
okay. So what I would do though is look in the 3rd volume and look at those signatures and see if the Jacob signature looks similar, because a lot of times they might have been mistranscribed from the signature, or it might be his mark and somebody signed for him. But
the typed list, Jacob signed with a mark, but Martin signed his name.
Oh, okay. So there you go. You're not going to find it anyway. But I would look at all the other passengers too to see if there's somebody on that ship with the K name, whatever that is.
I've been researching a long time, over 40 years, and I'm pretty good at looking under every single pebble that I can find. And there's nobody on that ship's list that has a name that's anything like this. I looked at that. I mean, this guy, this man or woman is a total mystery. Yeah. I may get to the Eastern European Family History Conference up in Salt Lake in August. And if I do, I'm going to take this along with me and see if anybody in the German department up there has any kind of clue what this might be.
Yeah, that's a good idea. More eyes always helps. I'm really sorry I can't get any further for you.
Well, I really appreciate that you ought to help people like this, and it kind of validates. I didn't feel too badly when you didn't know what it said either. I thought, okay, I'm not that dumb. Sometimes reading this foreign script, I feel like I'm in kindergarten. My dad's side of the family is Carpatho-Rusyn, and a lot of the records are written in Cyrillic. And when I have to try to find a name in those records, I look it up on Google Translate, and I translate it to Russian, so it puts it in Cyrillic. And then I feel like I'm in kindergarten trying to match the terrible handwriting with the letters in Cyrillic. And that's how I feel with this German stuff too. So at least I didn't do too badly with this, since nobody's been able to figure out, oh yeah, that's what that name is.
Yeah, and it's a stumper.
Can I make 2 comments?
Sorry, it really made me wish that this person didn't know how to write their name, because then the clerk would have put it in the English writing.
Right.
Sylvia, I went ahead and I put a copy of that handbook of coins and weights of the world in the chat. Okay, good. I just wanted to say something about that. Is the text is in what, the fractor? So yeah, and of course that's a breeze for you, but the rest of us might have a little trouble with it. But there's a toggle on that site, and you can toggle to what the text that we're used to. The trouble is, even when you ask to translate the site, not all the buttons translate into English. So you'll have to poke around for that. But once I was able to toggle that, then I could copy that German and paste it into Google Translate. But what threw me at first with my particular record was I was looking at a record from my ancestor's land, and he had 2.5 quarter and what it translated to, and so it threw me for a while. But when you think about it, is depending on the size of the piece of land you went out to, if someone asked you to survey the state of Virginia, you do it in square miles. And so you go out to maybe a bigger property in your neighborhood, and that one is clearly going to be so many Morgans. So you're going to survey it in Morgans. But when it's much smaller than a Morgan, and maybe it's chopped up, it doesn't have nice boundaries, you're going to just survey it in quarter Morgans. And so they put 2.5 quarter Morgans, and they don't convert it to, they put 2.5 quarters, and they don't bother to convert it to 5/8 of a Morgan. But that's what it is. It's 5/8 of a Morgan.
Well, that may be, but again, look at this map where you've got non-continuous lots. So for
Right.
example, you've got a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here. So they may actually have had 1, 2, 3, two fiddle here and half a fiddle over here or something. So they
some
wouldn't
property in front of the
combine.
house, some in the back, or some, yeah,
Right. So they wouldn't want to combine and say 5/8. They need to specifically say, these are separate parcels of land.
No, they're not characterizing it as separate parcels in any way. They're saying 2.5 quarters of vineyard, and it's the unit. It's just that they chose to measure the land in quarters because when they walked out there, it was obviously not, there wasn't even a Morgan.
Yeah.
And when I looked at other entries in that same record, it made sense that the smaller parcels, they just, what's the German word, that quarter,
Viertel.
What?
Viertel.
Okay, yeah.
Viertel, Viertel.
Okay. And it's also a little confusing because it's a liquid measure. So it's also they use the same term for a liquid measure.
Right.
Yeah.
Know your context.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, comments, suggestions for September? Otherwise, I'll say good night, have a nice summer, and see you in September.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you've done this year.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Sylvia.
everybody. Thank you for joining us.